Welcome to Behind the Build. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I have with me a figure that I had spoken to once a number of years back, and I was excited because he lived in the area of our old office, and we were able to reminisce on that. Today I have with me Paul Raff from Paul Raff Studios. Thank you, Paul, for joining.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here and always enjoy talking with you.
Thank you. Likewise. I generally will always take a stance with this as an interview process, discussion process, and I'll talk to people and say, let's go back in time and talk about some of that stuff. But I do want to start off by saying I am also disappointed with something that we talked about in advance, and you're wondering, what are we going to talk about right now? We look at our levels in audio, and unfortunately, I could not give Paul the selection of color for his audio. So I want to start off in apologizing to anyone that's been on, including yourself. It's just blue.
Yeah, well, I guess, it's an aesthetic. It's an aesthetic thing. I mean, colors have feelings and characters, and you're telling me I can't choose the visual representation of my voice as it appears on your computer screen, and it's frankly pretty disappointing, Jonathan.
But you know what? I have room for improvement. I'll add that to the list. Well, yeah, I've said it already. Thanks for joining. I think you know this. I've been a fan of your studio for a while now.
Thank you.
And the work that you put out is beautiful, and it's across multiple disciplines. And so there's I think a strong affinity and appreciation for your ability to be able to take ideas and put them out there into an architecture community in Toronto and beyond.
Yeah.
That people get to enjoy,
and in many different forms.
Yeah. So I will now go and do what I generally do, and that is to ask you about early inspiration in your career that led you down the path of becoming an architect.
I mean, I've always been interested in the physical world around me, the atmosphere and the character of places. In my childhood, I lived in the Canadian prairies, but my family also spent summers in a very urbane neighborhood of Montreal, and in other parts of the world. And I was always struck by everything that contributes to the tremendous difference of character, whether it be from city to city, landscape, geography to geography, room to room, building to building, neighborhood to neighborhood. The physical environment, we're always in one, is so much a part of life, and so many things contribute to what gives it its atmosphere and its character. Light, color, texture, objects, acoustic, sound, and properties, all these things, and that's really what led me into the type of creative practice that I do. I suppose there are other ways to explore it. I could have been a photographer or a filmmaker, and kind of am, as an amateur. But I decided to study art and very seriously study architecture and pursue being both, primarily an architect.
Right. Well, what's interesting is about the idea of pursuing it from a photography standpoint. Photography captures what you're looking to create, right? Versus creating and then allowing someone else to come and capture what you've created.
Well, photography is a creative act too. I mean, the moment the shutter closes, it captures what you're not seeing, and an image, has a life of its own. So it's a different art. You could also explore, and many have, the things that I'm interested, place and environment and quality of life, through literature, through stories, through poetry, and again, many writers do this. It's not an original idea, but that's how I came to be interested in it. Yeah.
And were there any defining moments in your life that led you down that path?
Well, I mean, as a little kid, I had a best friend whose family was building one of the first extremely energy efficient houses, actually probably in the world for a northern climate at the time. It was one that was actually, studied and measured. And, I was a very small child, and this was, before sustainability and ecology was really on the agenda of the building industry. And I saw the plans, and I saw how they could change the plans, and I got my hands on the plans and some grid paper, and I started to design as a 10-year-old child. I started getting into the idea of shaping and drawing. I loved to draw as a kid, as many kids do. And that's what really kind of hooked me on that type of creative act. And, a number of decades have passed since then. And honestly, I still love to do it in a very similar way. I just know a little bit more about it now. Yeah.
I would say with picking up a couple decades worth of knowledge, I would agree. You probably do know a little bit more.
Yeah.
But the idea of drawing as a 10-year-old, did that ever lead to like the reorganization of your room?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All sorts of everything from building snow forts to the reorganization of a room to all sorts of everything. Yeah. Yeah.
And so were you engaging in classes like after school? Did you start requesting that of your parents? Can I take an art class?
Well, my parents were both literary types. They were both like literary scholars, and my interest in things, drawing and things visual, was a little bit outside of their normal zone. And so they did enroll me in art classes, and I took to it, and I've basically was in art classes from childhood through the completion of university. So I never got a fine arts degree, but I got a tremendous amount of formal training in the visual arts. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I assume then going into university, when was the intent to apply for architecture?
Yeah, no, I went to architecture school. And
but that was the main goal, was to become an architect. Like you were applying, there was no other deviation that you're going to head towards in any other way.
Well, I was still, making kind of, short and poetic videos and doing photography and writing, doing creative. I was doing all sorts of things. And I don't know if you know, Jonathan, but I practiced as an artist for a number of years after I finished architecture school.
I did not know that.
For quite a number of years, I was making installation art, all sorts of things. With a few collaborations with my good friend David Warren, we took an abandoned, condemned house, and we sliced it up, we deconstructed it, we severed it in two, we undermined it from its foundations and collapsed it incrementally 7 degrees every 2 weeks over the course of 3 months until its roof had collapsed to the ground. And it was like an architectural installation that was time-based and shifted over time. And it was a laboratory of seeing how spaces change and forms change and the city changes. And it was very much an artwork. We had a concurrent art gallery show of photography and video. It had an opening, a vernissage. It was, visited by thousands of people actually. And we were doing work in, I was doing concepts for public artworks, and I was doing some interactive video work. It was all, but to be honest, like it was really like all very much related to thematics directly about architecture, about space and place and shape making and atmosphere, and
shapes,
all those things that I talked about being interested in as a child.
Yeah.
I practiced as an artist for many years.
Well, and one of the things that you and I discussed over lunch was I made the offer of what would you like to listen to, and the preference was to listen to us and the sound that we make as just humans and what we experience inside the environment.
The ambient sound, the inherent sound of the place without programming it with music. I love music.
Yeah.
I'm married to a musician. But yeah, the air, the sound of the air movement, the sound of, us, our chopsticks, and, grabbing the gyoza or of, like a bit of rustling of trees in the wind outside. Yeah.
Well, and I'm thinking and relating that ambient sound to what you would experience while you're collapsing that house and the sound and the creaks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Of what that experience would have been like. And people who don't know.
Yeah. Well,
is it going to collapse?
Yeah. As someone who really knows, building and buildings, you anticipate that.
Yeah.
That sound, because you're right. These types of buildings aren't meant to be twisted and turned and suspended from. And so actually, it was a phenomenal acoustic laboratory and light laboratory and spatial laboratory and material laboratory. And that's the beauty of architecture, is it's not actually a visual art, even though in our Instagram day and age, it gets reduced to, stills a lot and, a hashtag, whatever, and quick video bits. It's a very whole environment that you live, that's multi-dimensional and including time and very sensory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've brought up that word of tactile feel. The feel of architecture is something that cannot be picked up always in a photograph.
Yeah. Tactile and haptic. Are you familiar with like the sense of bodily orientation?
Yeah. As
you turn and rotate and ascend and descend and
Okay. So tell me, you went to school. Where did you get your education, and what school?
I studied at the University of Waterloo.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it very much.
Were you within the same time frame as like Kathy Garrido and Drew and Rob Kostelic?
Yeah, I met all of those people in school.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So it was a really, really incredible group that you went to school with.
Yeah, the University of Waterloo had a very small school of architecture, but it was very intensive and explorative and, really, rich discourse. And it was terrific. It allowed the kind of degree of kind of exploration, conceptual, artistic, technical, visual representation, all these things. And it was very strong in cultural history. It was wonderful.
And they have everything I understand is the amazing co-op program.
They do. And, that's what it's known for.
Yeah.
That's not the most remarkable thing about it. It's actually the culture and energy of learning and exploration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so when you finished out of school, what did you do? Where did you apply? What types of projects?
I worked as an intern architect in a number of offices. I worked in New York City for a while. I worked mostly in the offices of Richard Meyer and Edward Larrabee Barnes, who was a wonderful architect, on museum projects and residential projects. And I tended to be the guy doing design experiments. I remember at Richard Meyer's office, I redesigned the main kind of staircase in the main space. I think it was 23 different designs I produced and modeled for it. And it was a great experience. And then I also interned in Barcelona in some very small offices, working on public parks and public spaces and some public buildings, athletic facilities and little school additions and stuff. And it was wonderful. There was an incredibly, high base level of cultural appreciation and understanding and production of buildings in that part of the world. Mm-hmm. Barcelona is one of the great cities if you're interested in a full kind of range of architectural history, including excellent modern and contemporary architecture, much beyond Gaudi and the kind of famous things.
Yeah.
And that was wonderful. I also did an extraordinary amount of traveling in Europe while I was there, all over lots of Western Europe, especially Spain, France, Italy, Switzerland, and Netherlands were countries I really dug in and learned all about their, contemporary and a full kind of range of the history of architecture there. And then finally, I was itching to practice as an artist, but I took one serious full-time position after I graduated, where I worked as a project architect in Hong Kong. For a while, I worked on a for the oldest firm in Asia, and I worked on a number of things, but one of them was a private residence for a senior official of a very high-profile family in Shanghai. And again, I used the opportunity to travel very extensively in outback China, in southern Thailand, Guangdong, Japan, extensively.
And what year was
this? Was the 90s.
90s.
This was the 90s, yeah.
Okay. Were you backpacking as you were doing this?
Yeah. No, you know, in Hong Kong, I had a home base, so
Okay.
I'd sometimes shoot out and backpack for
Right.
weeks and then come back and keep working, or not come back.
and I mean, part of what I find so interesting about this is that if you're listening to this and you are you have a certain vintage, you can appreciate the fact that the internet has not always been so easily accessible at our fingertips.
That's right.
And so when you were going to go travel into these countries where English is not the first language and you are highly identifiable as
Yeah.
not local.
That's putting it politely. I stood out like a sore thumb. I was in rural China where places, you know, where the dirt floors and then the town was made out of mud bricks, and little boys would either run away from me or throw stones at me because
Right.
I'd never seen anyone who looked anything like me before.
I mean, I didn't want to. I wanted to allow you. I wanted to do a lead in and let you take it. But the concept of being able to go and research these places, like what were you doing to be able to figure out where you wanted to go and the types of architecture you wanted to go see? Because you're talking about some of these more obscure practices and structures that exist. How are you sourcing that? What were you doing? Is it from conversations or?
Well, when you're
books?
traveling, you do meet people on the road, but yeah, no, it was good old fashioned books.
Yeah.
It was reading, you know, carrying language books and language dictionaries to try and communicate, carrying maps, like paper maps.
Yeah.
And,
Or if you lose it,
yeah. And I just read a lot about, you know, the history, like in the case of China, about the history, about the geography, and there were some good travel guides. And, you know, I went out of my way to find, for example, a Buddhist monastery in a small town that no one's ever heard of, that probably doesn't even exist anymore, because it had a famous little courtyard with a famous tree that was centuries old, and which monks risked their lives to water and keep alive during the Cultural Revolution, when it was a crime to practice what they were doing, and it was there was so much character and expression in that tree. It was a sort of physical and cultural artwork, like no other. Or in Japan, I had the benefit of having a contact who was a professor who actually was a scholar of certain types of traditional Japanese theater and architecture, and I got some pretty good tips on where to dig in on the history of Japan and see original minkas, the farmhouses and all that. And so, and also had worked in New York with some Japanese architects who showed me the cutting edge of modern too. And so anyway, all of this is, I feel like a lifelong student and explorer. And
there is no any way you could throw over all of that as a blanket. No way. The experience to be able to go into a world that you're not comfortable with. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
In some ways, you're walking into a town.
Yeah. Sounds like you've done it before.
Right?
Yeah.
And you walk in and you are out of sorts, but in some ways you also feel like you're home. Right. And there's just something pulling you into the exploration of what the unknown is going to be ahead of you.
Yeah. I don't know if I felt like I was at home. You may feel like you're comfortable with the uncertainty and comfortable with the shifting in the unfamiliar environments. And it can be actually quite intoxicating. Some people get traveling and don't want to stop.
Yeah.
But as an architect who designs, amongst other things, homes, I wouldn't say it's like
it didn't feel
like being at home.
Okay, fair. Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Fair. Yeah, I guess where I'm going with that is not to be so overly profound with the concept, but more so the comfort in knowing who you are as a person and what you're going there to do. can provide a level of, and you, I guess you said it, is just comfort. And when I think of comfort, I think of home. So I don't know, maybe I'm just, I'm mixing those words together and combining them, but so, okay. So you complete your travels. You had worked at another practice, overseas in New York.
Yeah.
And what led you to Toronto?
And practiced as an artist for many years.
Yes.
And
Sorry?
it was,
yes.
I was doing mostly that in Toronto. I came back to Toronto.
Okay.
I was practicing as an artist for a number of years, and but it was all about architectural things. It was just without clients and without a lot of practical constraints. I still had budgets and timeframes and sites and realities, gravity still works and artworks and, liability does too. But I think I just, saw the potential, like tremendous potential to kind of harness the knowledge and creativity and kind of, ecological kind of perspective that I've developed, and to make beautiful things in the world that, I think I just saw the potential to, to work with and for people to make wonderful, wonderful things, hopefully incredibly unique artistic works of architecture or environmental art, but sometimes just to take on challenging problems or to help people see what's possible when they're not sure what to do.
So after all of this travel and exploration and working in other practices and being an artist, when did you start your practice? What year?
Well, it was just over 20 years ago. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary last year. So I'd been practicing already kind of artistically, but that's when I took out an architectural license and incorporated a firm, and realized that to be able to like really do the things that I wanted to do and realize the potential that I saw out there, that I wanted to have a company, and so that's when it started just over 20 years ago.
I have not asked this question to an individual yet who doesn't start to exude the same thing you do, and that is the smile. But thinking back on the concept of starting your own practice, the risk, putting your name out there, thinking about all the things that could or could not happen, the ignorance at the time, right? Like, I don't know where it's going to go. I'm hoping this is the direction it goes. And the joy when you, in a snippet, as you say it, think about those 20 years.
Yeah.
And, I get to see it. No one else does, but I get to see the smile.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, 20 years ago, frankly, I had the ambition and I saw the potential and I was excited about it. At the same time, I was really a guy sitting alone in a big studio with a computer and a sketch pad and a telephone. And I started out, frankly, I was teaching design, architectural and design studios and theory at local universities, and trying to figure out how to connect with the potential. And it's just amazing that 20 years has gone by. When we had our 20th anniversary, we invited some past clients and collaborators to come by for a toast and put up some photos and models of things that we'd done over the years. And it was really, gratifying and amazing to see all the kind of rich variety of things that have happened over the years as a result of the studio. And by the way, it's the studio's named after me, and I'm the creative director, but it's a highly collaborative place. I have an incredible team of gifted, skilled, talented people, and the secret of our success has a lot to do with our collaborative energy.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about that a little bit. You start off the practice, and now we'll kind of fast forward to where we are now with the practice and staffing. But when you started out on your own, it's a big undertaking. you don't have any staff at this point, right? When you started, or did
That's right. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you didn't know where all your projects were coming
No. And of course, the intelligent thing to do, if any young architects are out there listening, don't do what I did. Instead, get a job with a firm, get at least 10 or 12 years of experience, build up client relations within the firm, and then go start your own practice as an offshoot from that. That's the smart thing to do. Lots of people do that. That's actually the more normal model. I started a little young with no clientele or no list. Yeah.
You have nothing to lose and everything, right? Nothing and everything. And so I think that in some ways, both models are potentially very worth exploring. If you have the ambition for it and the tenacity.
Yeah, you can say that. I've already given my advice. Yeah.
I mean, well, look, 20 years ago, you took a chance on yourself and it's paid off. You just celebrated 20 years.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. I know that the climate nowadays is different, but yeah, fair. You know what?
Yeah.
Fair.
Yeah.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
So what were some of the initial projects? What did they look like? And what were you trying to offer clients that really allowed you to stand out as a value add to their project? Because I'm assuming artistry and environment and all the things that you've so far discussed, but how do you communicate that to the people that you're going to work for?
I don't know. And I never read any books on marketing or went to management school or anything like that. I'm always, pretty just straightforward about who I am and what I do. And I took on any little project I could get. Sometimes I was, doing a little house renovation design or, doing a garage, small, like these little things. But, one of the first projects I did, in fact, the very first ground up building was this garden pavilion, really just a sort of gazebo. But the client was an artist and had been an art teacher of mine. And she was open and really let me, it was a modest structure, but really let me engage in the ideas of, sculpting a place to be in nature based on a kind of Eastern philosophy of harmony with nature. And we made this garden pavilion, many thanks to her trust in me, because she had this beautiful garden and wanted a kind of place to go, a place to be. It has multiple functions. You can use it in different ways. You can have outdoor dining and so on. And that was the first kind of small building. And then I got hired to design a house, which became Cascade House, which was our first ground up house, in which I just feverishly pursued ideas about passive design principles and ecology and healthy environments and non-toxic living, and shaped it into a house which, for whatever reason, when it got published in the design press, no one talked about it, that it's a passive solar house or anything like that. It was all about it being modern and modern style. But
watching your
yeah,
eyes.
Well,
you're missing the point.
It dumbed down into photographs,
right?
Yeah. That being said, I'm grateful for the publications. They, this helped launch me. At the same time, remember, I'd worked in Hong Kong and traveled. I had some connections back to Asia. I was also quickly knocking off quick master plans for whole new subdivision housing developments and stuff in China and so on. Kind of large scale developments, like very large scale. I was laying out the street patterns and deciding where the parks go and the towers and all that, working on these incredibly different scales. The garden pavilion was knitting together 2x2s and 2x4s with little, steel connections. It was like jewelry. And then I was, doing housing for 3,000 people at a time in China. But one of those in overlooking the Andaman Sea, beautiful tropical island, I designed a project we called Treetop Villas, which was meant to be a very high-end housing project. Yeah. But because it had kind of virgin, old, mature growth trees, we did it very unusually. We did very small footprint buildings, and you had to kind of leave your car at the top of the ridge and access it either on footpaths, a network of footpaths, or on footbridges. It was very, very simple, just simple boxy buildings clad in local bamboo, modest construction techniques. But I think the Garden Pavilion and Cascade House and then Treetop Villas, through that, a kind of identity was born of an architectural practice, one which, is where the medium of building, like, Turner or Picasso know their paints and their pigments and the optics of color, and in construction and building, knowing wood and steel and glass and everything, really kind of and it combined with a kind of ecological mindedness and a desire to make resonant connections between people and nature, even in a city, the sky and the seasons and light. I think through those first few projects, the identity of an architectural practice was born. Yeah.
And you didn't think that you were good at marketing.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, when you speak the truth about what you're trying to emulate in the building, in the environment, you just talked about it. I mean, what you're talking about is a connection to the earth, to the surroundings, to your experience where you're inside and you feel like you're outside. And I apologize if what I'm saying is distilling it down to something more simple than that.
No. Yeah.
But you're talking about all these connections to literally everything that a human can exist, all of the senses.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I'm a person who much prefers being outdoors than being indoors. And it's kind of ironic to be an architect, right? And you're like, architecture ultimately is like everything that separates you from outdoors. So how can you? Yeah. Go on.
Well, you can see it as that, or you can see it as a safety net from what is outdoors, because you do need refuge from the outdoors in some way.
Yeah.
If you're going to live, especially in the climate that we're in.
Tornadoes, coyotes, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Mosquitoes.
I watched the show Alone on history, and it's like these people that got dropped into the middle of nowhere and they've got to go fend for themselves, and they got grizzly bears and wolves and all the rest of it. Nonetheless. And then they build shelter.
They wouldn't mind a little architecture.
Exactly. Exactly. And so you're what you're talking about is you're building an environment, but you're building an environment to feel comfortable in the environment that you're in. And I'm using my hands to extend past the walls of what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. But what I try and do is have a resonant experience of being in the world of being more than just aware, but feeling the passage of the day and seasons, and it should be like feeling attuned and connected to one's surroundings, including maybe what's beyond the room that you're sitting in. Yeah.
It's funny. I actually have a vision of someone sitting on like a sundial, and they're the sundial, right? And you're just feeling all of the different temperatures and weather patterns and everything coming along, the sun moving along, and you're the one directing where the sun goes, and you get to experience all of that. The home is the sundial in some way.
And I think of almost all of the buildings and sculptural works that my studio does as being sort of sundials amongst other things. I do. Like the garden pavilion was actually designed, like the angle it points to is peak summer solstice sun, and it creates a full shadow on the interior at the hottest moment in summer, but allows direct sunlight to warm you in the cooler months. I mean, it was designed like it's very intentional.
I mean, I would at this stage of our conversation, and you explaining that to me, I would that's what I would expect.
Yeah. Right? And, if you're going to design according to passive design principles, passive solar and dealing with natural light is one of them. It's nothing new in the world of architecture. Le Corbusier wrote about it. Everyone knows about it, that light renders space, and that it's, Kahn wrote about it. But it's not something I consider thoroughly trodden territory. It's something I'm still taking on.
Yeah.
In fact, that we're just completing a national monument in the Parliamentary District in Ottawa, which actually is a mapping of the every azimuth of the sun for every daylight hour for an entire year. So it's over 4,000 bronze rods, each one pointed at a unique angle that expresses an entire calendar year. Yeah.
And and you're saying how I was an artist. Nah. No, you still are an artist, my friend.
Yeah.
If that's what you're describing, that is, I mean, as much as that's architecture in some way, that is also creative art. Like that is.
Yeah.
I want to go experience that now.
I think for everyone, there's a point at which it's not really useful to feel a need to categorize something, whether it's art or architecture. It kind of doesn't matter. But
fair.
Yeah.
I guess there's always that inherent need to qualify something.
Well, it can be helpful for communication, and it can be unhelpful when you're just trying to decide whether something belongs or not in a category.
I'm just doing it. Just leave the descriptions alone.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so, and you described this piece of work. There's another piece of work that you have done that gets experienced by thousands of people a day in Toronto. It is a very, very, very interesting project in Vaughan. Where's he going with this? I don't like to ever be the one to describe what it all the detail about what it is or what. I like to do a lead in and then hand it over because it is really an intriguing project visually and immersively to experience.
Yeah. Well, it's Vaughan Metropolitan Center Station. It's a subway station, a relatively new subway station. It's the last station on the long extension of the Spadina subway line up north of Toronto. It's a building. The design architect, the lead design architect, was Grimshaw out of their New York office. Fabulous architects, fabulous collaborators. It was a delight to work with them. They're amazing. We worked with Arup as the engineering team and Adamson Associates. It's a huge subterranean building. It's a large, multi-level underground building that has a moment that pops up. It's the kind of pavilion, and the most identifiable part of the station is a kind of dome shape, one-story, very large dome-shaped pavilion, elongated dome-shaped pavilion. And my role was to collaborate with the design team to develop this dome with a kind of architecturally integrated artwork, which I call atmospheric lens. And it is the dome itself. It is apertures in the dome, skylights, which have chromated reflective coffers. And then the underside of the dome, in Renaissance Europe, they would have, Michelangelo would have painted a fresco with the angels and blah, blah, blah. Or in, Islamic, whatever century of Islamic mosque, it would have been a fine lattice work of geometric exquisiteness that dappled light in. And in this case, we used different types of mirror polish reflective surfaces. It's almost like a kind of inside-out mirror ball, so that the life within the station, like the people moving and carrying grocery bags and, whatever, coming in and out, gets reflected up in the ceiling, and all the movement of people and stuff. You see people sort of walking upside down in different collaged glimpses of views. It's a kind of a bit kaleidoscopic.
I was waiting. I figured you were going to go there.
It's almost like a cubist collage because it's different views except it's time based because people move and they appear here and then there and then there.
Yeah, they could be a few squares over.
Yeah. So that's what it is, and that was a very gratifying work because it's going to be there for a very long time.
Yeah,
and it's it was kind of young part of the metropolis, Vaughan. Now there are all these towers going up, and this was a kind of landmark place, which is an entry and exit, arguably, other than the freeway, the main entry and exit into the city.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
pretty powerful, right? To be able to be a part of that all, and to, in my own view, to allow the commuters, the inhabitants of the city, and those that are traveling through the city to be the art in the time that they're there, and then the next people.
Yeah, and to contribute to their daily lives too, which is it's kind of what it's all about. When it's like as an architect, and I think in talking to other architects, you're finding this out. Like, hopefully, what we care about is what our work's actually really doing.
Yes,
for people's everyday lives,
but without them even realizing it. It just creates a feeling.
Yeah,
right. It creates a feeling.
Yeah. So these commuters actually. The apertures in the dome are specifically designed around sun angles to create moments of light shooting through to the lower levels of the subway station.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And you went there too, because I was going to say how you're bringing light in from above into a subterranean space, and taking this back to the levels that we see on the computer screen and color, and how this is blue. And now within the subterranean space of the Vaughan station, you're bringing all different kinds of vibrancy to a space that otherwise would never see it.
Yeah, including the color blue, by the way, not so different from what's on the screen, because the reflective coffers of the skylights actually change the shaft of light to a blue color at certain times of day at certain seasons.
Right,
and you see that very intentionally sky blue color cast on the surface of the lower level of the subway.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's taking bits of sky down below.
Interesting how this is all connecting.
I don't think the designer of that computer software was very mindful about this, but yeah.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
And so another question that I would like to ask is, so we've talked about, here, this is it's a government project, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And you talk about a home.
Yeah.
And I know that there are other commercial and institutional projects that you take on. So, and I want to ask you about the staff before.
Yeah.
So your staffing, do you have separate teams for residential and commercial, or do they intertwine?
No, we do work in teams, but that's because we have some very, we have a kind of leadership team of some very skilled and experienced and talented architects. So, we're a small firm, we're a boutique firm, but we're big enough, and this was, part of the idea of the outset, that we can handle multiple sizable projects at the same time. We have horsepower, but we're small enough to provide a very personal, kind of very personal hands-on attention. So we do work in teams, but we follow projects through from beginning to end, and we do vary it up. I want people to work on a church or a hotel, as well as a custom home or a house addition renovation. I want them to work on a monument or artwork. When we do these different things, we get better at what we do. Too much of our, that was a judgment call. The vast majority of our built environment is done with a kind of systematic kind of economy, which starts to get down to kind of rote processes, and we want to be like really in control of the medium and of the process, and so when we're making artworks and we're actually in the fabricators on the factory floor and stuff, we get to learn a level of craft and customization that normal architects don't have access to, because they're speccing products from a product library, and for very good reasons. Those things come with warranties, and therefore help architects with their tremendous responsibility and liability. But my firm has developed an ability to do highly bespoke kind of industrial design level stuff. So we are doing, for example, some furniture as well as some artworks and components of buildings, which normally wouldn't be done in such a customized way.
Right. And you take on both architecture and interiors?
Yeah, we don't tend to think of them as separate, and we do, architecture interiors. We get down to full furniture and art selection and bath owls and everything when it gets to that.
Landscaping.
Yeah, no, we don't have. We happen to have someone who's a horticultural expert, but we claim we don't have horticultural expertise.
Okay.
But we're designing actually several garden spaces, and actually recently we're part of a competition team with a very good landscape architect for an urban park. So we're part of shaping landscapes and gardens. Even I wouldn't hold myself up as a horticulturalist at all.
Well, I mean, in fairness to that's not where I was going. It was more so about the design and the integration of what the landscape on the property would look like and how it works to accentuate.
So, for example, we're working on a kind of hotel spa right now in a rural location, quite large, like multi-hundred unit suites. And although, of course, there will be a landscape architect on the project in the initial conceptualization, master planning, and shaping of the work, it's the buildings, it's the parking and the roads, and it's the open spaces and the concept about how the nature of that landscape and how it's going to dovetail into the beautiful environment in which it sits, because that's what you have to do if you want to build in a place because you think it's beautiful and not displace that beauty, but instead like integrate with it and complement it and give, and in some ways create new, even better experiences of it.
So what does your practice, what has your practice look like from like a low staffing number to its highest volume of staff? What has been the variation?
Like anywhere from kind of 8 to 18 is an
okay.
Yeah.
So it's you say a small firm, but it's still like it's a good sized practice to be able to take on what you suggest, and like that's you get I think with numbers like that you get a really, really nice range of varying experience from their lives, but also from their viewpoints and what they're going to bring forward to a team to be able to go ahead and design.
Yeah, we have just a wonderful group of diverse, interesting, lovely people. And I think what's nice about it is it's easy to attract, intermediate or more junior architects and designers, because they get to, like I said, be so close to projects, so intimate with it from start to finish, and work very closely with the project leads, and it's wonderful for their growth and development and exposure. And it's and lovely. Did I mention that they're lovely?
You did.
You know what? I've got to say, one of the lessons I used to in when taking on people to join the studio, we'd of course look at their portfolios and make sure that they had real skill and that they could be useful. But useful is an important criteria. Agreeable is an equally important criteria. I like to work with, whether it's the wonderful architects at Grimshaw or the wonderful builders, like you just want to work with good people. Yeah.
It's interesting to say that, like with Walden, what we have really in many ways the same as you is we focused on having a core group of people that are all working towards the same concept of collaboration. Yeah. Right. And it is such an easy word to throw around. Yeah. Oh yeah, we collaborate. Yeah, we collaborate. Oh, yeah. Man, let me tell you how we collaborate. Yeah. And then you show up to site and then nothing's what you expected. We've put a really big precedent on the concept of collaboration and not being a solution. Yeah. Right? Because a lot of what is in your mind and what's on paper is the hope and expectation that everything that's there can be done the way that it is. Mm-hmm. It never turns out that way. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so, you having a staff where everyone's working towards that same common goal and everyone understands that they are fulfilling a role and they are a piece within the wheel. I would call it like, everyone's an individual spoke, right? And when a spoke breaks, everything starts to wobble. And now what do you do? And you got to either repair it or you've got to, someone's got to have to hold stronger on their side because now it's out of balance. Yeah. Creating that type of an environment is really, really hard.
It is, collaboration and in what you do and what I do and in all sorts of other things in science and technology, like in all sorts of other things is critical. And in our world, a photographer can work solo, but in our world, if you want to make great work, it's collaborative.
Yeah. Well, I think we're aligned on that front.
Yep. Yeah.
So tell me, outside of work, you had said when we had talked about setting a time up to have a discussion, when you came in and we met today, and you were saying how you had come up with some ideas of some of the topics or some of the things you want to make sure you were able to get out. You were sitting in your hammock at the cottage. So tell me, what are some of the things that you still love to do? Some of your hobbies and interests that are outside of work, and who do you enjoy that with? What is your family?
There isn't a big threshold between work and life for me.
I've come to realize that majority of practitioners.
I have a lovely young family who I spend a lot of time with, and who are also interested in art and culture and the things I am, luckily. And I like being out in nature, and I love exploring cultural things. I'm exploring cities and galleries and stuff when I have time, and exploring through all sorts of reading. I'm reading an amazing book called Lying in That Hammock, not sitting, lying in that hammock, called Amerasia, which was published by Zone recently by Alexander Nagel, who's a colleague of his, an art historian and a historian, about the about the period after Columbus's first voyage, and the what we read into the art and architecture and mapping and texts of the next 100 years, about how the world's ideas about its vision of itself, what was America, what was Asia, what were these other places outside of what these Europeans had mythologized about based on the voyages of Marco Polo. So I'm reading that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
travel. And you were telling me before that your wife is a violinist.
She is. Yeah. So that's a different world. I'm a generalist, and she's much more of a specialist. It's like living with almost like a high performance athlete. She's very devoted to her art and her craft, and it's amazing.
And you are also potentially a striving artist in the guitar form.
You're bringing this up to embarrassing me.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
we've got guitars here, and
I love, like most people, I love music. I hack away at a guitar and try and make, palatable sounds out of it. I do like to think about musical composition as an analog for in the work I do. Like, I have projects with names like Counterpoint House and Madrigal House, and this is actually true. I read my wife's thick dictionary of musical terminology just for fun.
In the hammock, or this is in a chair?
Yeah, that's anywhere. That's anywhere. Yeah, that's in the middle of the night when I can't sleep. That's my go-to reading. Yeah.
It's funny because as we're talking about just generality of music and sound, so there's a reason why the majority of the guitars that I have are away from the house.
Yeah, that's good.
And the basement is soundproofed.
Yeah. So if anyone's listening, there I don't know. I see two guitars in this room.
Yeah.
One of them is a black kind of
It's a blue Ibanez. Or if I'm saying it incorrectly, but
okay.
Yeah. Actually, I will say this: my wife just gifted this to me. It just arrived yesterday.
That strap.
The strap, and it's the Buddy Holly lyric. Saying "Not Fade Away," which was same as the tattoo on my right forearm. It's my father's favorite song.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And then I see your other one. The white guitar is it's also electric.
Yeah.
But it's a hollow body.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I imagine it has quite a different sound.
It's a Gretsch. It's a completely different sound. Yeah. Yeah. And then downstairs I've got a an incredible Les Paul.
And they've got the whammy bars, so you can like really, bend those notes. Yeah.
If only I could learn how to bend them.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what? You do a recording of yourself. You send it to me, and I'll loop over it.
I wouldn't torture the world with.
Neither would I. That'll stay
at risk.
That'll stay between us. It'll be in a Dropbox with multiple encryptions.
Oh.
Paul, I thank you for the time. I know that you're busy. I know that you have a lot of staff that are probably texting or emailing you now. I appreciate all of your candor. I appreciate you opening up and talking about all of the incredible experiences you've had traveling, talking about the practice and how it's evolved, and the connection to the environment and what you're trying to put out there with your incredible craft and your vision. I appreciate the fact that we were finally able to sit down and meet each other in person, which we hadn't done before, and we've spoken on the phone over the years.
It's great chatting with you. I thank you for getting me, away from my computer and my drawing board, and it's lovely to have a chance to talk about all these things, and I appreciate your questions, and mostly I appreciate that you're creating a forum for this kind of discourse. I think that. Like we talked about briefly, the world of social media is a little quick, and architecture is reduced, and other, environmental design forms are reduced to quick JPEGs and hashtags, and it's a big part of life, the environments we live in, and creating a forum for all of us to share ideas is. It's really, it's good for everybody. It's wonderful. So thank you.
Thank you.